this video, I'm going to explore what's new with the OM System 100 to 400, f5 to f6.3 Mark II. That was a mouthful. And I'm going to explore also whether OM System have created perhaps the best starter kit that you can buy now if you're getting into wildlife photography. The best thing about this video is we have a lot of options for a lot of budgets. I believe the Mark I of this lens is still going to be on sale for a while, so if what's new in the Mark II isn't swaying you, you could potentially get a bargain with the Mark I. There's also a couple of different camera bodies that we can explore as well to see which would be the best combination for you. So, what's new with the Mark II, and is it worth it? So optically, the Mark II is the same design as the Mark I, which is to say, still blooming excellent. But the biggest upgrade now is this lens has Sync IS. So what this means is if you have an Olympus or OM System camera body and you pair it with this lens, the IBIS in the camera and the stabilization in the lens will now communicate with one another and give you an enhanced stabilization experience. This is something that has only been in a very select, very few high-end pro lenses in the OM System / Olympus lineup. So I'm very happy to see it in a more affordable lens. Oftentimes, if you're just shooting everyday stuff, it doesn't matter. The IBIS in the camera is usually more than enough. But when you are working with these really long focal lengths, like this is 800 millimeters in full frame terms at the long end, having an additional amount of stabilization will make the overall experience so much nicer. The reason is, if you want to shoot video, you'll have much more stable video now, but more important than that, when you are looking through the EVF, the stabilization in the lens will help keep things steady while you're on the hunt for the animals or the sports or whatever it is you want to shoot. Do not disregard the importance of this upgrade. I think it's a really good step forward for OM System, and I think it should have been there all along. Let's just say that. But I'm glad that it is now on the Mark II. Another cheeky little upgrade on the Mark II is the tripod collar has had a little bit of a makeover. It makes it a little bit lighter but no less robust. And I love the OM System collars in general because the plate is Arca Swiss. So if you have a compatible tripod, which is I do, all of my tripods are Arca Swiss, you can just put the tripod collar straight onto a tripod with no additional plate. And then the third big upgrade on the Mark II is there's a new style of lens coating on the front element, which will make it repel water and reduce streaks and also improve colour and contrast as well. It's a very little thing, but I think it's very handy because if you are shooting wildlife, you'll probably be in lots of inclement weather conditions, and there's nothing worse than losing a little bit of sharpness on your image if you've accidentally left a smear of water on the lens. Because you have such a long focal length, the lens will often shoot through these things and you can't necessarily see it in the image. Like you won't see like a smear on the photo, but what you will see is a lack of sharpness and a lack of contrast. So having this extra coating is very, very handy if you are shooting in the drizzle and the rain or the snow. The OM System lens and its predecessor is also weather sealed as well, which you would hope, so you can pair it with any of the weather sealed cameras and have a good old robust setup for wildlife. Let's just quickly look at how it compares to the Lumix Leica 100 to 400 because that's the super zoom that I've used the most. In terms of size, the Lumix is a little bit smaller, and also you do have the aperture start at f4 instead of f5 at the wide end. But I think most of the time with these lenses we're going to be shooting at the long end, so they're both 6.3 in that respect at the long end. In terms of image quality, not just my findings, but I've seen on other reviews as well. At the long end in particular, at 6.3, the OM System lens is sharper. Not significantly so, like I've got loads of usable, wonderful images with the Lumix, but if you do look side by side, you can see a lot more detail in the OM System at the 400mm. It depends on what you're shooting and as to whether that's massively important to you or not, but I think if you're shooting birds in particular, where you want to get all of the fine detail of each of their feathers, you will get sharper results with the OM System. There is pros and cons to both. The Lumix one is smaller and it has a wider aperture at the wide end. The OM System one is that little bit bigger, but generally sharper overall. Plus, if you're pairing them with different camera bodies, the Sync IS in both of these lenses will only work with their native bodies as well, so definitely bear that in mind depending on what camera body you're shooting with. So what about the camera body to pair with it? Well, the three main wildlife extraordinaire cameras that OM System have is the original OM1, which is on this table somewhere, this one, which is absolutely excellent. I've had many a great time in the bird hide with this camera, and also I took it to Kenya on safari as well. And in terms of the subject detection and autofocus speed and accuracy, it's very, very good indeed. So that one would be option 1 and probably the most budget-friendly option. Next, we have the OM System OM1 Mark II, and it will look identical to the last camera I just showed you because it does. Aside from it saying OM System on the front, it's pretty much identical. But the upgrades here, which I discovered in the Faroe Islands when I was shooting the puffins last year, is the new AI subject detection in the OM1 Mark II is absolutely superb. It also has a bigger buffer as well, so particularly for shooting burst modes over and over and over again, the OM1 Mark II is probably the best camera on the market that you can buy for that specific purpose. Even comparing that to the G9 II, I had a really long, nerdy G9 II versus OM1 Mark II video in the Faroe Islands, which I'll link in the description. But in a nutshell, if you are particularly interested in burst modes, subject detection, accuracy, and being able to do the burst modes over and over and over again without waiting for the buffer to empty, the OM1 Mark II did have the edge. If you'd like to learn more about why I came to that conclusion, definitely watch that video next. It's very nerdy. And there's loads of pretty puffin photos in that as well that I'm really proud of. Anyway, so that's a second option. The third option I would throw into the ring is, of course, the brand new OM System OM3. In terms of subject detection and burst modes, you've got a very similar setup to the OM1 Mark II. Of course, the OM3 has quite a slender, flatter profile. However, let me grab my S9. I would show the OM3 here, but it's still on pre-order. So this is the S9, and it has a similar sort of feedback from what I've seen in my comments, where the grip is very flat. And people will often immediately throw out the whole camera and go, well, if I'm in a bird hide, I'm going to want a nice big grip. And that is very valid. Like, if you are only shooting wildlife stuff and sports stuff, having the big grip is definitely the way to go. But if you are sort of a little bit of this, a little bit of that, like I am, there is a perfectly reasonable workaround. And that's just buy some accessories. I've got 2 little cages for my S9. I have this one, which is like a full sized one, and then I have a smaller half cage as well, and it just adds on a grip, doesn't add anything more to the weight, and it looks quite nice and stylish as well. I have no doubt in my mind that Small Rig and other brands are going to be making these sorts of accessories for the OM3. If you are thinking, you know, maybe you do want a more flat street photography setup and you want to dabble with wildlife photography, just get a grip. Literally and figuratively get a grip and just buy an accessory. So you could put this sort of thing on when you need it, take it off when you don't. So for the OM3, there are a couple of differences between the OM3 spec and the OM1 Mark II. In the mechanical shutter, for example, the OM1 cameras will do 10 frames a second in a burst mode, and the OM3 will do 6 frames a second. In practice, like when I was shooting the Huskies with the OM3, it didn't make that much of a difference, but if you want pure power and spec for your wildlife photography, the mechanical shutter on the OM1 and the OM Mark II is a better option. For electronic shutter burst modes, which is what you would tend to do for birds in flight and utilising the Pro Capture mode, you have exactly the same on all 3, which is to say 25 frames a second with most lenses, and then if you have the really fancy pro lenses, you can go up to 50 frames a second. In terms of subject detection and accuracy, the AI subject detection on the OM1 Mark II and the new OM3 are that bit better than the original OM1. But that's not to say that the original OM1 is bad by any stretch of the imagination, but that's just how it works. So there's pros and cons to the 3 different camera bodies available to you. So now that I've spent some time with the new 100-400 and we got some nice photographs, I have to say I really like the setup. And if I was in the OM camp in Micro Four Thirds, there isn't a better option for like a really solid starter kit in wildlife that will get you to hit the ground running. You could get everything that you need basically with this one super zoom and one of the 3 camera bodies available, and you'd have everything you need to get excellent shots straight away. So check out my G9 II versus OM1 Mark II video next, or perhaps my OM3 review if you haven't seen it yet. And let me know in the comments, can you think of a better starter kit than what I've discussed in this video?